This episode contains spoilers. Please listen responsibly. Hello everyone, my name is Jason Ramirez, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Hit List Podcast. A podcast where me and a guest cross off films from a watch list and by watching them. I'm joined today by entrepreneur, educator, and UMD alumnus, Ben Choobinay. Welcome, Ben. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Jason. I'm really glad to be here. Actually, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Before we get started with the movies today, can you tell me a little bit about your streaming viewing habits? Whenever you sit down to watch a movie, do you choose to watch something new or do you stick to your favorites?
That's a great question. Actually, I'm all over the map. I like all kinds of movies, except for horror, but we get to that. It depends on my mood, honestly. So I love movies. I've always loved movies. It's the way that I relax and I get away from my crazy life of an entrepreneur. Sometimes I feel like a comedy. Sometimes I feel like a really sad, depressing movie. Sometimes my wife and I want to watch rom-coms. But the top type of movie that I watch are either science fiction or action or superhero movies. Superhero movies are on the top of my list. So, I'm a big Marvel DC fan. I used to be a big comic book reader when I was younger. I don't have time for that now. So if there's a new superhero movie out, I'm gonna be watching that right away, right? But beyond that, I'll see what my choices are. I'll look around what's available to me. And if it's a new one, I'll watch a new movie that kind of calls my name. If not, I'll go to my old favorites and look around to see what I haven't seen.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing for me. With the help of this podcast, I've been watching more newer stuff. Before it'll be like some of my old favorites. And I agree with you there. I used to not like horror as much. And it's just so crazy because whenever I'm on Instagram, I do the discovery. And there's always like something new happening in the comics. And I'm like, wait, they did that now?
Yeah.
There's like a war over like the Jokers. I'm like, okay, this is getting a little too crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree with you there.
Well, the comics you can't keep up with, all kinds of craziness happens. But I used to be totally into the X-Men, so I used to follow that a lot. I like the new Avengers spin of the Marvel universe. So, that stuff kind of gets me going if I don't have anything else new to watch. But honestly, like lately, as I'm also getting older, I like mature themes. I like drama that's real and honest as well. So some of the independent movies that I watch are really, really enjoyable as well. With the horror thing, I used to watch horror movies all the time, but one thing happened a long time ago when I was in college that just totally stopped. I stopped watching horror movies after that, and that's called the Blair Witch Project. Have you heard of that one? It came out in the movies. Now everyone knows, it was just fiction. But when it came out, they actually marketed it as real, like a documentary. And we went and watched it thinking it was real. It scared the shit out of me, and I just couldn't. I couldn't watch horror movies after that, even though I found out immediately that it was fiction. But it was just so scary thinking of it as documentary. So I know we're not talking about that one, but I would recommend you watch it. Of course, knowing that it's fiction is not going to have the same effect, but it was really strong when we watched it.
Yeah, I read up on the history of the Blair Witch Project, and I believe it was also shot in Maryland.
Yeah,
and from what I've heard, they even said on the IMDb accounts of the actors in there that they said that they were missing after that project. And back then, they would like share like the VHS tapes of the film, and people would share it with each other, and people actually believed it was real. And knowing now, like, it's fiction, is like, oh yeah, I can watch it, but like, I don't know how I would have reacted back then if I thought it was real.
Especially that I'm in Maryland, so it's like, we're both in Maryland, and I was like, oh my God, this is really happening, and it was genius marketing. I don't know if they could ever do it again, especially these days. But back then, social media wasn't huge. Secrets wouldn't come out as quickly, so it was like the perfect timing for what they did. So when my choice of the movie, we chose that, and then I looked it up, and I was like, holy cow, it says horror. I was so scared to watch it, but it wasn't actually a horror movie. It was actually a pretty good movie. So
Yeah, I didn't know how you felt about the horror movie, so like, sorry about that, but hopefully they weren't as scary for you. because they weren't as scary for
No,
me.
no. So I mean, it's my choice was the movie was Get Out, and it said horror, and I was so nervous to watch, and I watched it last night in preparation for this. And in the end, it really wasn't like a horror movie. It was a thriller, that's for sure.
Right.
And it was really enjoyable to watch, I have to say. And I got all kinds of observations from that whenever you're ready.
Yeah. We did a little something different for this episode. The two films we chose are actually somewhat related because one of them influenced the other. So the two films we'll be discussing today are Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele, and The Stepford Wives, directed by Brian Forbes. And just for a little fun fact for y'all, Jordan Peele took inspiration from The Stepford Wives when he wrote Get Out, and we'll have more details on that later. So Get Out was on Ben's list. Ben, why was this movie on your list?
Because one of my companies has majority African American employees, and I went into the office, and when it just came out, and they had all watched it, and they were like, "Oh my God, it was crazy." They're like, "It was really scary. It was really horrible, but it was really, really good, and you couldn't stop watching it. Not horrible in a bad way." And I'm like, "Was it scary?" And they're like, "Well, I was like, was it racist? Was it like, was it about racism?" They're like, "We can't really explain it. We can't really tell you. You just have to watch it."
Right.
So the whole time I was thinking it's about racism in America, which is, I think, a very apt subject, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting ready to talk about, get into all kinds of serious discussion today about racism in America. And then I watched it, and I have to say it was not what I expected at all. But racism is a topic that I'm very interested in. So that's why it was on my list.
Yeah, I gotcha. I first saw it back when like in 2017, like a few months after it was in theaters. I watched it at a friend's house, and like they just had it on, and I became very interested in it because I'm the type of guy I won't believe in the hype because I've been disappointed before, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll just like wait like maybe months or years later. And that one I felt really I felt bummed out I didn't see it in theaters because I loved that movie so much. So a little bit of background on to Jordan Peele. When I first heard he was coming out with this movie, I thought it might have been like a funny movie or it might not have been good because I've only known him from comedy stuff. So like before he was mostly known for Get Out and Us, he was mostly known for his sketch comedy show Key and Peele alongside Keegan Michael Key.
That's right.
And before that, he was on Mad TV. So for most people, this came as a complete surprise that he came off a horror movie that he wrote and directed, and a movie that like a lot of people enjoyed it to the point like he was in Time's list of 100 influential people by the end of that year in 2017. So this movie meant a lot to a lot of people. I want to ask you, what were your favorite aspects about the movie?
So, as an immigrant, when I came to America, I was 15 years old when I came here. I honestly had no concept of the race, I guess, the concerns and issues and problems in this country, right? Just thought everybody's an American and that's it, right? And so when I came here, I went to high school and I was just trying to learn English and figure things out. And then I got to college. And that's when I started to kind of feel the need to understand more about this. And so I took a African American culture and history class in college, and I learned so much about the African American plight. And what was really interesting to me is that I showed up in class, there were like 30 students. I was the only one who was not black.
Mm.
I was the only, and I'm from Middle Eastern origin, so I guess I'm brown, but, I saw myself as, white in my way, but, I just wasn't, and I was like, why is everybody black in here? Why is no one else interested
Right.
in this other than just black people? And that to me was kind of crazy, right? So, as I've learned more and more about the history, there's so much to it. There's so much about the conversation that just people on either side may not understand. And what I thought was incredible about this movie, first of all, I'm a screenwriter, and I, just love the screenplay, and I know, won the Oscar. Just the way that the story is unfolded. That's number one. Number two is the cinematography. I love how it was at the beginning. Everything's bright and everything, and then as things start to uh, get unhinged, you get darker and darker and darker, and the scenery gets darker and darker. Of course, it starts with that very first shot of being dark and at night when the first guy, I'm very bad with names, but the first guy gets abducted. The third thing was I loved the girl, the way that she was presented, where she was at first this really innocent girl, and she was just like in love with her boyfriend, and it slowly turned into she was like the this evil mastermind and this greatest actress. But also her makeup, her look was just part of that. Like where she was this innocent person wearing it, and she just completely flipped at the end. She looked like a totally different person. Her makeup was different, her hair was different, her dress was different. But finally, and most importantly, it was obviously the conversation about the race relations. And what I thought going in was that these guys are racist. They're gonna want to take over and use these people as servants, right? That's the message that it gave.
Hmm.
But in the end, they all wanted to be black. It wasn't about racism as much as black envy and how grandpa and grandma turned black, all these other people. They all kind of looked up at black people as having this advantage, but it wasn't like a healthy
Hmm.
right way of trying to understand black culture the way maybe I did when I was younger. It was more like, ooh, look at the muscles, look at the genetic advantage. Again, seeing black people as objects, even when they looked up to them. And that is just the depth of that thought and that conversation, where even when these people are thinking that black people are the way to go and they want to be black, they're still looking at black people as objects and not as individuals. And that I thought was the genius behind the movie.
Yeah, you perfectly said it. I couldn't have said it better myself, actually. The way they like idolize the body, but not the individual.
That's right.
What you said, something about the actress who played the girlfriend. I forgot her name as well. I'm sorry, but from what I saw and what I was reading, is that she was casted to throw people off because like she was able to do it very well. So,
Hmm.
did you know that she would turn evil at the end, or like she was evil the whole time, or did that surprise you?
No, until the scene where he finds the pictures from the other boyfriends and even like the girlfriend that turned into the grandma. I mean, I had no clue. And usually I'm pretty good about these things because again, I'm a storyteller, I'm a writer. It completely caught me off guard. Completely caught me off guard. And that's again the genius of the movie. Because normally, like 99% of the time, I'm like, yeah, that's the guy or that's the girl, and that's what's going to happen. And my family hates me for that because I basically, give up the movie to them. But in this case, I was completely caught off guard. The last time I really felt caught off guard was The Sixth Sense,
Mm.
and I didn't feel that way. I have not felt that way about a movie until last night when I saw Get Out.
Yeah, I also felt the same way with her as well. There's something amazing whenever you get this like a second or third rewatch. You kind of see some clues in there as well. Remember when the cop helped him after like they hit the deer, and then he asked for Chris's ID. She asked him why. So at first watch, you might think, oh, she's just helping him out because he didn't do anything wrong. But really, it's because she doesn't want the cop to have any record of him being there. So I thought that was like a genius way.
That's ridiculous. It's just so good. And it's like, obviously, I'm going to watch this again to kind of understand how the writers came to this, right? And were able to fool me of all people. But you're absolutely right. Again, when you watch it again, you see the hints, and there's again the genius where even the hints are hidden to a point where like there's no way you're going to find out. And I just thought the whole great thing was so great, so great. I felt when you watched a good movie when at the end you feel invigorated.
Right, exactly.
And that's how I felt about this movie. At the end, I felt like a surge of energy that I've learned something, that I'm better off for watching this movie. And yeah, I was scared shitless at times, but again, it wasn't a horror flick. I know it says horror on there, but it was to me it was a thriller, yes, but also a great education of and again, obviously this was not a real situation. It could never be really real. But even the white people who say, they love Obama or they love, are they really, looking at each of these people individually, or do they look at race as or people who are different than them? And it's not necessarily white versus black, but just people who are different than them, whoever they may be, as just representations of a race or objects as opposed to people. And that was just, oh my God, it was just amazing. Just to see that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that whole thing right there. And you said this is more like a thriller, and you're right. I actually have a quote right here. So Jordan Peele, he describes this movie as a social thriller. And in a 2017 interview conducted by, I'm going to say the name wrong. I'm going to try my best. Bilge Ebiri for The Village Voice. When he was asked about the social thriller, he said this: "The social thriller is a genre I'm particularly obsessed with. To me, it's about the notion that to find the scariest monster, we need to look no further than the human demon. And
Hmm.
when I talk about the human demon, I'm talking about the evil we're capable of collectively. Society is capable of some beautiful things, but when we get together, we're also capable of the darkest atrocities. Get Out, I would consider a social thriller. The horror is embedded in the way people interact, the way people think, the way people categorize. It is a very difficult genre to pull off, but when it's done right, it's my favorite thing in the world."
That's it, categorization, right? Putting people in buckets. I work with the military, and a lot of times I will go out with some of my soldier buddies who've been to war in Afghanistan and Iraq, fighting with and shooting at people that might look like me. And I ask them and I say, I wonder about that. Hey, we're having a beer right now, but you shot at people that look like me. How do you see me? And they're like, what do you mean? You're my friend. You're a person. You know, but in the end, I think we all as humans, while my military friends have been very forthright about the fact that they differentiate between people that they shoot at or shoot at them that they have to defend against, or people that they're friends with, no matter what they look like. But in the end, I wonder if we don't, as a race, intrinsically and instinctually categorize people in our minds based on the way they look to begin with. I know we might meet people and become best friends with them. I myself, I'm Iranian, and I see that in Persians or Iranians, in that we categorically, in the right sense of the word, don't like Arabs, and Arabs don't like Persians, or when we look at Japanese or Chinese people, they don't like each other, or French and British people have common enmity because of the historical, or Palestinians and Israelis, right? But any one of those people could be best friends, and even if and I actually have friends who are Arab, and in my mind, I have to ask myself, do I differentiate between the people that I know and those that I don't? And if I don't know them, are they objects to me? Are they categorized in some way? And all of those thoughts came in my mind after watching this movie last night. Never thought of it before. I mean, can you imagine when a movie is done so well that someone like me, who's 49 years old, discovers something about myself as a result of watching that movie? To me, that's just incredible.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great insight as well. What you said about like the categorization right there, it reminded me there was a documentary where a an Australian man, he's interviewing some people from the KKK, and like he's with them with their family, and they're having like a barbecue, and then he asks them, "So right here, you're inviting me in your home. Would you view me any differently if I told you I were Jewish?" And the man who was being interviewed, he said, "Yeah, I probably like without these cameras, I'd probably kick your ass and then get you out of my home." And he's like, "Well, are you Jewish?" And the Australian said, "I don't want to answer that question now. Like, it doesn't matter, but I don't want to answer that question now." And then they laugh, and then later on, the whole interaction becomes more hostile as like the man's wife, the interviewee's wife, even asked him even further, "We just need to know. Like, we know it's not a big deal, but we just need to know." So
Crazy, right?
it's crazy to think that's like whole big deal. So even though he wasn't Jewish, it didn't matter enough for him to like tell them whether it was yes or no. But apparently to them it did.
I have a story like that when I was in college, and still kind of imbued with a lot of the cultural baggage that I brought from my home country. I had this really good buddy of mine, white guy from Ohio, who was really very liberal, very mature in his thinking, even when we were in our early 20s. And I would be like, hey, I met this girl, she's French. Or I met this other guy, he's black. Or I met this other person, and and we're hanging out. Or this guy at work who is, Middle Eastern. And at some point, I would talk about others, but the first thing I would say is their race or their nationality before I actually talked about them.
Right, right.
And it was completely not related to whatever I was talking about. And at some point, he said to me, it's been like a few weeks that I know you. And every time you talk about somebody else, you bring up what the race or nationality it is that they're from when it has nothing to do with the story. Just kind of wondering why you do that. And I was like, really? I do that? I had no idea I did that. Right. And I stopped doing it after that. Because unless there's a reason that I need to say if someone's, white or black or from whatever country or straight or gay or whatever, why am I even bringing those things up? Right. And that's, to me, was also another lesson. And what I'm saying is, after watching that movie, I started thinking about all these things. It made me think. And that's where the genius is for Get Out.
So, Ben, do you think you should have seen Get Out much sooner?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wish I'd like you. I wish I'd seen it in the theaters. It's also the cinematography is amazing, right? Just the way that it's filmed and the emotions that it invokes. You know, the close-ups when the grandma servant lady is saying, "Oh no, 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 no," and she's got a tear coming out of her. I mean, it was so powerful, where it's really kind of like the two individuals in there fighting it out, and it just kind of shows it. Yeah, I wish I'd seen it earlier.
And now, a word from our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
Jason, your movie was Stepford Wives, which I haven't seen. And now I'm really curious to see because you're telling me it was the source material for Get Out. Why was it on your list?
Oh, so you haven't seen it yet?
Nope. No, I haven't.
Okay. We're both supposed to watch it, so
Oh, shoot. I'm
no, you're
sorry. I
good. You're
had no
good.
idea.
So I'll tell you why right now. So Stepford Wives was I wouldn't not necessarily source material for Get Out. It was the inspiration for it because Jordan Peele said that it's a satire horror movie, and it's not that great as a horror movie, but it did say something about society in a way. So I'm gonna spoil it a little bit for you.
Okay.
Stepford Wives is about this one family. They moved from the loud New York City into like the small Connecticut community called Stepford, and automatically the wife of the family, the mother of the family, she realizes that the women there are acting very strangely. They all act like they're from the 50s, like the stereotypical 50s housewife, right? And there are other women there as well who just moved into the town who are also very suspicious about what's going on, and she gets like some friends along the way. But very soon, after she realizes that after like 4 months of their stay there, so like she had another friend who was there for like a month, and then once her 4 months was like passed, she started acting very strangely too. She became the stereotypical 50s housewife. This she thought was very weird because she was very much a feminist, and she wasn't the type of woman who like liked cleaning or cooking for the family. Yeah, so the reason why I put it on my list is because when I was reading about my research about Get Out back in 2017, I want to see what inspired that movie, right? I want to see what went into it. And the two movies that I saw that inspired that movie were Rosemary's Baby and The Stepford Wives. And it
Hmm.
just so happened when I was emailing you for about this episode, about this recording, The Stepford Wives was like on Amazon, so I thought might as well watch that movie now.
I actually, this came out in the early 2000s, right? Or something like that.
No, that's the remake. The original movie came out in 1975.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I think I remember the remake. Well, that's interesting, but and obviously now I'm going to go back and watch it, and maybe watch the original as well. And by the way, Get Out was on Amazon as well, but I had to pay it for the rental.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a valuable movie. It's a good movie, so it makes sense. What do you think was it about this movie that then got the makers of Get Out to think?
Yeah, so this movie was in part took inspiration from the feminist movement from the 70s.
Hmm.
And the thing that I found very interesting is that there's a woman, her name is Betty Friedan, and her book, The Feminine Mystique, was the major influence of the original novel, which the film is based on. And she was very critical of the movie, and she said, and I quote, a ripoff of the women's movement. And she commented that women should boycott the film in an attempt to diminish any publicity for it, which I found very odd because, if anything, this movie is anti-men.
Hmm.
Because I'm going to spoil a little bit for you. There's like a men's association in the community. And then like the father of the family, when they first move into there, he wants to be a part of it. And once he's a part of it, he starts to act very suspiciously. And one night he comes back home from the meeting and he's drunk and he tells his wife, "You know I love you, right?" And she's like, "Of course I know." And there's a whole thing behind it. But do you want me to spoil the film for you, or?
Yeah.
All right, so basically, the men who are in the community, they're scientists, like they're engineers, mathematicians, the whole shebang. And the town is like close to like these factories of like, electronics places, kind of like IBM from like the 70s and all that.
Uh-huh.
And so one of the men, he has the woman in the film, Joanna, the main protagonist of the movie. He has her record her voice several times for like an experiment to like basically something scientific. I forgot exactly the reason why. And all the women do it, and eventually they're able to create robots of the women, and then they kill the women to replace the robots. Kill the women to replace them essentially, and the
Wow.
men are behind it. And I thought at the end, I thought it was the craziest thing because like even just like in Get Out, he thought they're taking the black people and using them as slaves.
Uh-huh.
They thought in the movie maybe there was something in the water that was turning these women against their own character. But no, what really happened was that they just had the main guy, the main, how do I say, the director of the men's association. He used to work at Disney, and he used to make the robots for Disneyland, and he was behind like making the replica of the women. So eventually he creates these robots of the women, look exactly like them, uses like the voice recordings so that they sound exactly like the women, and then those robots kill the women and replace them.
So the ideal wife is one with no personality and just kind of does what they're told.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
I wish. No, just kidding. So just kidding, honey. If you're listening to this, I see the parallel though, right?
Right.
It is like objectifying a group of people. But here's the difference I see, and you tell me because obviously I didn't see the movie, but based on your explanation, the wives were not. It's not like they were trying to be like the women. They wanted robots that were completely opposite of the women, the actual women, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in Get Out, these guys are like, they're trying to be black, you know? They're trying to get into the brains of the black people and just have the black bodies. You know, grandpa is black now, you know, grandma is black now. And then the other people, the guests, I observed how they were like looking at this black guy and like, you know, wanting to be in his body. So it's that part of it, I think, again, is genius from the Get Out perspective. But I see how there's relation here. And I really want to see Stepford Wives now. It seems to me it completely at that point objectifies women, right? That concept of complete objectification of women, which I think is also kind of genius because when you think about when this came out, and like you said, during the women's lib movement in the 70s, you could see how the women from the 50s were seen as objects because they just were trained to do as they were told, like robots. And men who want that as opposed to women who have their own minds. And they want to go back to that, you know, good old America, you know, make America great again, I guess. But you know, there is a lot to be said about that, you know. That's very interesting. No, I definitely want to watch it.
I forgot to add this in. Not only were they objectifying the women, Joanna, she was flat chested in the movie. Like the actress, she's flat chested, but like the robot that replaces her is her breasts are much larger, and she was like really mad about that.
you know, you know, and there, you know, there's people now out there. I saw a couple of YouTube videos that have decided that their mannequin is going to be their partner. So that it's not, you know, it might have seemed like really far-fetched in the 70s, but people who have mannequins will now speak and listen and respond using artificial intelligence. Really high-end mannequins who are also sex objects and just sit there until you wanna use them. And there's men who are into that. So it you know, I don't know how that would work because I honestly, I to be honest, I do enjoy the fact that I have a partner that's real and that is equal and has their own opinions and most of the time are not mine and I can learn from. You know, I honestly, I've been married 23 years and I'm so much the better off it and I'm being honest now. You know, some people just can't handle that. Some men just can't handle that. And that's an interesting concept. I definitely want to watch. Now I want to watch both of them. You know, the remake. Have you seen the remake?
No, I haven't seen the remake, but it's more of a comedy from what I've read.
I see. So yeah, I'd love to watch both of them to see. But you know, there's something to be said about that because there are men out there who have had enough of women having their own opinions, right? And who just want to
Mm.
just live with a robot, and that's a fantasy of theirs. So there's a reality about that. I would say though that most men would not be like that. So it's a caricature of kind of men wanting to have women with no thought or mind, or at least like for me and you know, I grew up in the 80s and I'm sure most of the people that grow up after me, you know, it just doesn't make any sense for a woman to not be part of life as an equal, right? It just wouldn't work. I wouldn't want a woman who just does whatever I tell them. It just wouldn't work for me, you know? So I don't see it as real as maybe the premise for Get Out, which really is part of our intrinsic instincts, I feel like. But it still is real for many men, I think. For many people who want or maybe are longing for a time when maybe that was the case. I don't know.
Yeah, and the thing that people have realized with the, how do I say, the analysis is that like the satire of the whole thing, whereas Get Out is about race, The Stepford Wives is about gender. It's an interesting dynamic to see like the issues that they talk about is still like hopefully not as like big now, where like the men want it to be more dominant than the women, and they want the
Mm,
women to be more submissive, which
mm,
is an outdated ideology.
definitely.
As far as like the race thing with Get Out, the way I saw it is that not necessarily they want to be black, but I saw it as like they didn't want to do that to their own people. If they wanted to, they could have like gone like on any other person at any other race to do it, but they didn't. They chose black people specifically. And then like also like in the Get Out, she was also looking up NCAA prospects, and I found that hilarious.
I know. You know, I feel like race or thinking of people as different than you is something that is intrinsic and instinctual, coming from evolution, right? And the tribalism of evolution. And there's something where we have to work on that constantly. Whereas men and women's relationship is very cultural. You know, there are many cultures where women rule around the planet. There are many cultures where they're equal, just culturally, and have been so forever. You know, there are minor pockets. Mostly men have been have had the upper hand because of their physical strength, but it's not constant. But the constant in the human experience is this instinctual separation between you and someone else. Race is simply an excuse, I feel like. And people you don't know, people you're not close to, people you're ignorant about. Could be another country, could be a neighboring country. So there's just so much more, to me, and maybe because I don't know, my wife and I are pretty much equal in our relationship, I believe. I hope so. She might think she's the boss though. So I think race is intrinsic. It's instinctive, and we have to fight it. We have to learn to accept each other. Now, some may say, no, the kids don't see each other as different. But I'm not talking about people who live together in a community. And that's what's lovely about some of the, city communities or communities where there's multiple races working and living together, because you grow up together. But you might see someone from the other town or from another country as different. It has nothing to do with race. It's just people thinking of others they don't know about as different, as fearsome, you know? That's just instinctual. It's tribalism.
Definitely. And there's something I learned when I was my first semester at UMD. It was an intercultural communication class, and I forgot what the experiment was called or whatever, but they found that like hamsters, if they're like two of the same color, so for example, there's two white hamsters that grow up together, they'll like each other a bit. Like if one white hamster sees a black hamster when they're adults, they won't like each other. However, if they're like a black hamster and a white hamster growing up together, and they need to like help each other with the experiment, if the black hamster already grew up with a white hamster, they'll be more likely to help them because they grew up with one and they know.
That it's okay. That's
Yeah,
right. That's right. So a lot of it is really not racism as much as tribalism. I mean, people in the Midwest may just not, I'm generalizing now, but may just not see black people a lot, right? So at least people in the country or something, or in places where everybody's white. So you can't blame them if they're afraid of black people. Now, there's TV, there's internet, there's all kinds of stuff, right? So they have to work on themselves to understand that intrinsic instinct is wrong, and so it's very complex and it's never going to end. I don't see it ending. I see we need to educate people. We need to get people together. We need to get people to understand each other. But tribalism is one of those things that's just never going to end. It's intrinsic and instinctive. But I think relations between men and women are just learned and cultural.
they can definitely be improved as well. Like
Of
we're
course.
always learning. We're always learning,
Yeah, and
so
and I
always gotta
love
improve.
yeah, exactly. I love living in America, first of all, instead of the Middle East, where there's a lot of problems between men and women, and still there's a lot to learn. And also where I was able to meet and grow up and grow older and learn more from others, from other races, other countries. And I became friends with an Arab person, best friends in college. When if I had just stayed in Iran, I might have grown up hating all of them without really knowing any of them, right? And so, to me, we are living in a world where that's just no excuse. Just because I'm saying that tribalism is instinctual and intrinsic, it doesn't mean that we have to accept it.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we can't grow past it. We all have work to do to grow past it and to evolve past it, but there's always work to be done. It's just, as Americans, there's no excuse. Maybe if you're like in the middle of Africa, I did some work, with the World Bank in West Africa many years ago. And I ended up visiting a very, very poor village, just, obviously filled with natives who were, pure black. It was beautiful, actually. And this little baby, takes one look at me, and I was visiting with other, native African, obviously people who were working there. And I was like, I want to go see this village that no one else has seen. And they're like, what? Are you sure? I'm like, yeah, just take me to some place that white people don't really want to go. And so they did, because I was curious and I wanted to learn and I wanted to see. And these kids who had never seen someone who, from their perspective, was white, take one look at me. And this is kids now. This is like 4-year-olds and 10-year-olds. The 10-year-olds run away and the 4-year-olds start crying because they had never seen anything that looked like me.
Wow.
Right? So, yeah, if you're growing up in a village in Africa, or you're growing up in some, far away Siberia white place, then I guess it'd be nice if you learn more. But if you're growing up in America today, you have no excuse to be racist. You have no excuse to give in to your intrinsic instinctual tribalism. So, Jason, I guess I'm going to ask you the same question you asked me. Do you think you should have seen Stepford Wives sooner?
Yeah, I think I definitely should have watched it sooner. It would have helped me expand my horizons, not just in like cinematography, but also like commentary on feminism and like the women's liberation movement from like the 60s and 70s. I should have seen it right after Get Out.
That's cool. Well, I definitely wanted to check it out now, for sure. Seems like a very fun movie, too, to watch.
Yeah, it is. It is. Okay, we reached the end of our discussion. Ben, thank you so much for being here. I had a great conversation with you today.
I'm really glad to have been here, and I was able to, I'm sorry, I hope I didn't talk off your head, but I was able to express a lot of ideas that just rushed into my mind when I watched this thing. And it really shows, it speaks to the genius of this movie, and I fully 100% recommend people watching it. So, and thank you. I had a great time.
Usually I ask the question, did you find the movies a hit or a miss with you? Let's hear it again. Did you find Get Out a hit or a miss with you?
Oh, it was an absolute hit, and I want to watch it again. And what about Stepford Wives for you?
That was a hit. Surprisingly, I thought it would suck. If I'm being completely honest, I thought I had this like prejudice against older movies, which I probably shouldn't have anymore. That if it's older, it'll probably suck more. But this was actually a really good film. So that was a hit for me.
Cool.
So that's the episode, folks. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, cross off a new film from your list. Thank you for listening to the Hit List Podcast. If you like this episode, please consider giving us 5 stars and leaving a review. It really does help. You can also follow us on Facebook at The Hit List Podcast and Instagram at _hitlist_podcast.